we're going to be doing all of this in Python. And the reason we're choosing Python is because it's really versatile. It's not very fast, but it's really versatile, and it's really easy to pick up, generally speaking. There are certain complex topics that can be a little harder to understand in Python, but by and large, Python is really, really easy to understand. And on a practical level, it's probably one of the most practical programming languages that you could know for day-to-day use if you're not like doing serious web development or any kind of embedded programming, things like that. If you're just using programming to do basically scripting to automate certain tasks and simplify things, Python is what you want to be doing it in. And if you're in engineering, like me, or scientists, anything like that, Python is also very good. If you've never programmed before at all, you've probably never heard of anything like MATLAB. But if you have, and you're, like I said, in that engineering group, you'll know what MATLAB is. Python can replace MATLAB. And in the later videos of this series, I'm going to talk about the things that you can do to replace MATLAB with Python. And there's a lot of great things about Python that essentially replicate what MATLAB does, but it's free and it's open source. And there are some things that Python can do that MATLAB can't. So getting started, go to python.org, and you're going to want to go to downloads. So we're not going to download the latest version, actually. We're just going to click Windows. And what we're going to do is, so one thing you have to understand about Python is that Python, you don't want to download the latest version of Python. The reason for that is because a huge power of Python is not actually Python itself, it's the community of Python. Python has a giant community of people who are all working on it all the time. And there's tons and tons of things called packages that extend the usability of the code. And I'll be honest, Python is kind of not usable without packages, actually. The packages make the Python. And there's something called pip, which we're going to look at in a minute here, which makes installing other people's code very, very easy, and it makes Python infinitely more powerful. So for this series, I'm going to be using Python 3.9.10. The latest version is 3.10.2, and the trick is generally you want to be 1 to 2 versions of Python behind. So 3.8 or 3.9 would work, and I'm choosing 3.9.10 because that's the most recent iteration of a major release. So the first number is the version of Python 3, the second number is the major release, and then the third number is the revision. So you just want to, basically, those are going to be bug fixes, but fundamentally the same. Whereas when you jump a whole number on the second number, that means that there's a lot of changes. And a lot of the packages that I was talking about that are really critical will not work until they get updated, essentially. So you want to be a little bit behind the curve so that you have the most compatibility. So I'm going to save this file. Okay, I'm going to put it in my downloads. So I'm going to open this. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to double click it. Okay. And it's going to open this. Now, check add to path. I don't think it's supposed to affect anything, but I've seen pip not function properly if you don't check that. I don't think that's supposed to happen, but I've seen it happen. So go ahead and check add to path and just hit install now. You go through your menus of yes and so on and so forth. It's going to ask you, should you want to do this? Yep. And it's going to install. So the next thing, while that's going in the background, the next thing you're going to look up is PyCharm. So all you have to do is Google PyCharm. And we're going to go to download. And so we want community. Now, what is this? What are we looking at? Why are we? I thought we have Python, right? We don't need this. And you're right. So technically, unless if you don't know, you don't actually need this. But we're going to use it anyways. What this is called is an IDE. You'll hear this term thrown around. It stands for Interactive Development Environment. And essentially, all this is a way for us to write Python code and have some software help us write the code. Many people might not know this, but you could write Python code using Notepad. I mean, I could write Python code here and then just type save as, and all I have to do is type .py at the end when I save it, and it will be a Python file, and it will work with Python. So you don't need any fancy software to do this. You just have to install Python. So setup is successful. You just have to install Python, and then any file named with the extension, the last, you see .exe, .mp4, things like that. If it's .py, it's a Python file, and it will run. You don't have to do it in this. But we're going to write our Python code inside of this because this software will help us. It will autocomplete certain things. It will suggest things for us. And it makes developing Python code much easier. It will also color code the text, so it's very easy and obvious what we're doing. We'll talk a little more about how Python works, but Python is an indentation-based language, which is rather unique, but this will automatically indent certain things for us and things like that. So this is essentially just a helping hand. So we're going to hit download. And we'll get our download. We'll save the file. Okay. So while we wait for that, we'll just hang out here. It's almost done. So this is a pretty heavy. It's called Heavy IDE. It has a lot of features. We're not going to use all of them, but in later series, when we talk about, like what I said earlier, replacing other scientific applications with Python, having a powerful IDE is very important when you want to mimic that. So let's see, we want to create a desktop shortcut. We don't create associations here. You might wonder what this is. This means if I double click a Python file, it will open automatically in PyCharm. And when we're trying to make scripts, you don't want that to happen because when you double click the Python file, you want it to just run in Python, right? We're going to use this to edit our Python, but we're not going to use it if we're running scripts from our desktop. We're not going to use it because we might have here's a simple application. You might have something that perhaps renames a bunch of files or moves them. You don't want to open PyCharm every time you want to do that. You want to just double click your mover file or your renamer file, right? And so not creating this association allows us to do that. You can do this later, but I prefer on my machine not to associate the files. That doesn't mean we can't run Python inside of PyCharm, and in fact, when we're developing code, we will do that. But when we deploy it and when we want to use it day to day, we won't be doing that. So we'll hit next. We're going to install it, and now we wait for it to install. Okay, it's done installing, so we're going to hit finish. Now, there's my icon right there, PyCharm Community Edition. What I prefer to do is I prefer to access things through the Windows terminal, so I'm going to type pyc charm, okay, and then I double click here, or just click it once, and I don't want to import my settings. You won't get that. I had this previously installed. So we've got this kind of intro area. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit new project. Okay. Now a bunch of crazy stuff has come up. So what you're going to want to do is click up here to browse, and this is going to open all your files. Now, I don't want this on my C drive. I have a special folder for this. I want to put this under Python files, practical programming. Okay. Now, how do I want to make this environment? Well, I would like to go to my previously configured interpreter, and it's going to say, I don't have an interpreter. What do you mean? I want to use the system interpreter. Okay, and it knows when it says system interpreter, what that means is the Python you have installed. There's this whole world called virtual environments. We're not going to cover that in here. You can look into that on your own, but we're not going to be using virtual environments for this. Virtual environments are a way of having different packages and different versions of Python on your machine all at once. But for now, know that we're only using one version of Python. We only have one version of Python installed. So don't worry about that. And then as a tip, don't install multiple versions of Python at once without using virtual environments. And again, that's a whole separate topic. So anyhow, so we have this previously configured interpreter. We're going to hit create, okay? And it's going to make a workspace for us. And now we have some code. So we don't want tips here. So we'll close this. We'll remove that. That's called a breakpoint, and that's part of this IDE. That was not part of Python itself. So we have a nice Python script here. This is a basic Python script. We can run this by clicking the green arrow here, or right-clicking and clicking Run Main. It appears that this is still booting up, though. So let me pause, and we'll come back when this is fully booted. Okay, now that that's done, so what that was down there essentially is when you install a new version of Python, PyCharm is going to look through everything you have and try to determine what it needs to, how it needs to interpret these files. So the first thing we're going to do before we write any code, before I do that, so you'll know that it's done, and updating when you can right click and this is green. And so if I run this, you see it says hi PyCharm. So that's what this is doing. It's printing hi PyCharm. But we're gonna get rid of this because we're gonna write our own code. So I can click X there. So before we do anything, remember I said it's very, very important that you have packages with Python. Python is kind of if you don't have packages. So we'll start with just the most basic packages. You really need this package called numpy, pip. And what you do to install that is you're gonna open CMD, command prompt on Windows. And you're gonna type pip install numpy. Enter. Now, for me, it says it's already satisfied because I already have numpy. But you're also gonna type pip install scikit, or no, scipy is what we want. So I already have scipy, and then let's see, what are some of the other really critical ones? Pip install matplotlib. Enter. Okay, see, I've already got it. So those are the three really big ones if you're going to be doing day-to-day stuff. Oh, I forgot one more. Pip install openpyxl. This will let you interface with Excel documents, Microsoft Excel. Okay, so we've got all our packages and we've got our main file. So now we're ready to start writing code. And so I'm going to end this video here and we'll pick up and start writing some code in the next one. All right.